Hey everybody. So we're starting a new topic of evolution, which is one of the most important and I think fascinating topics in all of biology because it's the history of how did life evolve from the very first organism that ever lived, which was just a single cell. So we know today there's so much biodiversity. There's plants, animals, fungi, plus all the trillions and trillions of microscopic organisms. And evolution, when scientists study evolution, they're trying to figure out how did we evolve so much diversity of life from just basic organisms billions of years ago. And also, how did life begin in the first place? Well, one really good way of visualizing evolution is to think of life as one giant family tree. So scientists have discovered that over history, all life began with just one single cell. That's the ancestor of every single living thing that has ever lived. So we're on the family tree, we're on the tree of life, and every other living thing is too. And you can, as we zoom in, you'll see just how complicated the evolution of life has been over time. So life first began about 3 billion years ago. About 1 billion years into the Earth life. The Earth first formed in the solar system about 4.4 billion years ago. So initially, life broke off into two different groups. We have all the bacteria in this group, and they went on to continue evolving on their own branch of the tree. And then we had all the other groups of life, which are the archaeans, which are similar to bacteria, but they're actually more closely related to us, plants and animals. And all the other plants, animals, and fungi are off in these branches. So let's keep zooming into the eukaryotes. Remember, eukaryotes have complex cells that have organelles inside them. So the eukaryotes first evolved about 1.5 billion years ago. And then you can see the plants group split off from the family tree about that time. And the animals and the fungi, they were still evolving as one group at that time. So we're zooming further and further in time, and we're seeing different groups breaking off the family tree and evolving on their own. So we can see here, about 1.1 billion years ago, the animals and the fungi evolve. And we're still zooming through time. So the first animals break off, and the fungi are actually over here. So the fungi break off from the animals, and they start evolving on their own for the next billion years and have their own fungi family tree. And then over in the animals, about 650 million years ago, the sponges first evolved, and they have a family tree. And then the rest of the animals start evolving, and new groups start developing now. So 590 million years ago, jellyfish and corals and lots of other really simple animals evolved. Now we're starting to see some more common animals that we're familiar with. The vertebrates, the animals with backbones, they split off from the invertebrates over here. And the invertebrates have a huge family tree. There's millions and millions of species. But let's continue with the vertebrates because that's usually what we're focused on as humans. So lots of fish start to evolve. The sharks and the rays, they're in this group. Then about 400 million years ago, the lungfish evolve, and they're our important ancestors because they led to the land animals. So vertebrates didn't make it to land until the tetrapods evolved 300 million years ago. And now we can start to see the mammals group, or the amniotes. They evolved 320 million years ago. And there's our family tree. And then the birds split off from all the other reptiles, and the reptiles continue evolving into lizards and snakes and other things. So let's keep zooming into the mammal family tree. So we've got the marsupials. They evolved quite early, and then 90 million years ago the placental mammals evolved. The bats, they split off from the mammals group. And then we can see 65 million years ago the primates first evolved. And so here's the primate family tree, and we're getting closer and closer to where we're found in the tree of life. So we're part of the apes family tree. So 25 million years ago, the first apes evolved in Africa. That's the old world. 18 million years ago. Then we had the great apes. They evolved 14 million years ago. Then the gorillas split off from the other apes. And then humans first evolved, and we split off from the chimpanzees about 6 million years ago from our common ancestor. So hopefully you can see just how complicated the evolution of life has been. It started with just that single cell about 3 billion years ago, and by the process of evolution, slowly new species have evolved and they've split off to make this one giant tree of life. And we're still zooming out. Here we are. So you don't need to remember any particular groups we talked about, but hopefully it's given you an idea of what evolution is. So for today, we're actually going to be starting at studying the Earth, first of all, because you can't study the evolution of life without looking at the history of the Earth alongside it, because really important events that happened to Earth in its geological history, they affected how life evolved, and vice versa. Some important events for living things, like the evolution of particular groups of living things, has affected the geology of the Earth and its atmosphere. So here's a timeline of the history of the Earth, and this is a quick overview to give you an idea of how Earth has changed. So it formed about 4.5 billion years ago. The Hadean period, the Earth was still cooling down from when it first formed. The rocks were basically molten, they were lava, and so no life could exist at that time. And it took about 1 billion years until about 3 billion years ago, like I said, until the first simple bacteria evolved. And all they did is they lived in this period, and they just lived in the ocean. There were lots of shallow seas around the continents, and they lived in the shallow, warm seas. And then it's not for another 1 billion years, at least, until complicated life starts to evolve. You can see that the continents look completely different to how they do today, and that's because of continental drift, which is our main focus for today. Then some particular periods that are important. One of them, Snowball Earth, where the entire Earth was covered in glaciers, and it killed off thousands and thousands of species of life. And now we can see the continents have changed again by 500 million years ago in the Cambrian period. By 170 million years ago, the continents look a little bit closer to what they do today. And you can start to see the shapes of familiar continents. South America is actually joined in here, and here's Africa. And they're joined together in the continent called Gondwana. And Australia is attached to Antarctica over here. And by the time we get to 18,000 years ago, the continents look pretty much like they do today. Alright, that's our introduction to evolution.